Hi everybody. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to make a crochet pumpkin. This is the Gorge pumpkin. It's a free pattern that I just released. And I'm going to be using this Malabrigo Rasta in the color Carrot, which is perfect for pumpkins. I mean, it should be called pumpkin. But this yarn with my 10 millimeter hook, this is a Knitter's Pride ginger hook. All right, if you want to use a different yarn, you certainly can. Wooliest Thick and Quick is a great option for this, or any other super bulky yarn. I recommend using whatever hook size is recommended for your yarn. So for instance, this is a super bulky, but the Lion Brand yarn recommends a 9 millimeter hook, so I would go with a 9 for that. The Malabrigo yarn is just a little bit chunkier, so I like to size up to a 10 millimeter hook. So now a 9 millimeter could work for this yarn. It would be a little bit of a tighter stitch, but either way, if you're following along with the pattern, you'll know we're gonna start with just a basic chain of 14. You can customize this pattern and you could chain more or less to make a smaller or bigger pumpkin. It's really up to you, but following along with the pattern, I'm going to start by leaving a pretty generous tail. I like to leave around a foot or so. This is just going to be used to seam up the pumpkin later on, because essentially I'm making a long rectangle that I'm going to join and then stuff. All right, so I'm going to start with a slip knot. And then I'm going to put that slip knot onto my hook. All right, so to start your chain, if you're new to crocheting, hopefully you find this video helpful. Chaining can take a little bit of practice, so go slowly with it. If you need to pause this video or rewind, feel free to do that. So I'm going to loop the yarn through that first loop that I had there on the hook, and then I'm just going to continue to do that till I have 14. So here's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you mess up, just go back a step. 11, 12, 13, and 14. So what I like to look for are these little bumps on the one side of my chain, and if you flip this over, you'll see V's on the opposite side. This is going to end up being the bottom. I like to work into these top bumps of my chain. All right, so I'm going to count just to make sure. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. All right, so my first step for this first row after I've chained is I'm going to skip the first 2, and I'm going to do my first double crochet stitch into that third chain from the hook. So 1, 2, 3. All right, so for your double crochet stitch, you're going to yarn over, insert your hook into that first chain, or that third chain from the hook. I'm going to yarn over, grab that yarn, pull it through. I've now got 3 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over again, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and that's my first double crochet. So these first 2 stitches I skipped, that's going to end up being sort of as my turning chain there, and this will be my first stitch. All right, so I'm just going to continue into each chain. I'm going to do 1 double crochet in each. All right, so again, it's a yarn over, insert into that, look for that top bump, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. I'm just going to continue so you guys can watch. Again, feel free to rewind or pause. Like to pinch the bottom chain a little bit as I'm working into the chain this way. It can be a little tricky try to keep your tension loose. And if it kind of like curls or bunches up like that, that's normal. You're gonna just be able to like straighten that out after. All right, so one in each, all the way to the end. So like I said, if you wanted to start with a chain of 16 or even 20, you could create a pumpkin that's a little bit taller. This is essentially dictating the height of my pumpkin, which once it's stuffed and finished, this pattern creates about a 3.5 inch tall by 5.5 inch wide pumpkin. So I'm in my last chain, and that's my last stitch there. And so now I've got my first row. All right, and imagine this is, again, like the height of my pumpkin. So I'm essentially gonna just keep working in rows. So row 2 now. At the end of this row, I'm gonna chain 2. That's just acting as a turning chain. It's not going to be a stitch. I'm going to turn my work now, and I'm going to look for, at the top of my previous row, you see these V's here? That very first one is where I'm going to place the first stitch of my next row. So 1 double crochet, and then I'm going to continue all the way down. And that's it. It's really pretty basic. Once you get the hang of that double crochet stitch, I like to recommend for anyone who's a little bit newer, if you count your stitches at the end of each row, that's going to be helpful just to make sure that you have the same number. You should end each row with 12 stitches. So if you end up skipping one or something like that, you can always back up a little bit. Nice thing about crochet versus knit is it's a little easier to frog it and go back a step if you mess up. But one of the nice things about this pattern and pumpkins is they can be a little wonky. So, you know, if you end up with 13 stitches in your row, by the end of it, it's gotten a little bit wider. Not the end of the world. By the time you stitch it up, seam it up, and stuff it, you're not gonna really notice that. Plus, not every pumpkin is perfect. They have some lumps to them. All right, so I've got one final stitch. This is my last V. So I'm gonna go last double crochet here. And I should have 12. So like I said, you could go back and count these to make sure. All right, and then I'm just gonna repeat that same row all the way until I essentially will end up with a really long rectangle that's gonna measure about 14 inches long. Now, if you wanted a bigger, like a wider pumpkin, you could keep going and add extra rows, making it a little bit wider. I like this size, so that's the size that I wrote for this pattern, but it's super easy to customize, make it bigger or smaller. You can make a tiny little pumpkin if you wanted to. And that's it. You're just gonna continue all the way, and then you're gonna seam up those ends to make a cylinder basically, and then close the top and the bottom, stuff it, add your little stick or cinnamon stick, whatever you like, and that's the Gorge pumpkin. So I hope that you guys found this video helpful. I hope you enjoy making this pumpkin. It's one of my favorite things to make, and I'm excited to be able to share a crochet pattern with you guys this year. I do have the new knit patterns coming out on August 1st, so keep an eye out for that if you're a knitter, and happy pumpkining.